All right, so this is going to be part two. We're going to have a really quick turnaround today. So there is a genuine source-based confusion over which John Polycarp is supposed to have known, and it's baked into the earliest surviving evidence as well. So it's right there at the beginning. So why there's confusion? Papias' two Johns. This 2 John problem. The root problem is Papias' preface, quoted by Eusebius in the history of the church, basically, Historia Ecclesiastica 339:4. Papias lists John once in a group of apostles. What? Andrew and Peter, or Philip, or Thomas, or James, or John, or Matthew. Okay. Then he lists the presbyter John separately among the living teachers, and what Ariston and the presbyter John, disciples of the Lord, say. Eusebius interprets himself. He interprets this as meaning there were 2 distinct Johns. All right, John the Apostle, now dead in Papias' time, about 110, but really it's hard to say. Just say 110 to 130 maybe. And then John the Elder, the presbyter, still alive when Papias was collecting traditions. Okay, so Irenaeus' presentation of Polycarp's John now in Against Heresies 334, Irenaeus says Polycarp was instructed by apostles and conversed with many who had seen Christ, and that some heard from him that John, the disciple of the Lord, was in Ephesus under Trajan's reign. This sounds like John the Apostle, but Irenaeus doesn't acknowledge Papias' 2 John distinction. He writes decades later in a polemical context, okay, and the John he has in mind might be assumed to be the Apostle simply because that fits his argument. All right, so this is basically, I think, the big pinch point here, the big problem. Now, the Florinus letter, in the letter to Florinus, known only via Eusebius, again, so History of the Church 520 now, Irenaeus recalls Polycarp speaking of his familiar intercourse with John and with the rest who had seen the Lord. Okay, but which John? If we accept Eusebius' reading of Papias, this could have been the presbyter John, still called disciple of the Lord, but not one of the 12. Okay, this is the thing, like who knows by this time? And what can we really delve into in the 1st century? Where are the records of any of the disciples in the 1st century? They are completely absent, the historical record. There's nothing there. If we follow Irenaeus' own framing, it's John the disciple, of the Lord in the apostolic sense, the son of Zebedee. So John, the beloved disciple, one of the most important disciples of Jesus. 2, why the identity is uncertain. Terminology overlap. In early Christian usage, disciple of the Lord could mean either, and Paul makes this clear, one of the original 12 or a 2nd generation believer who had personal contact with Jesus. Titles were fluid then. Elder, presbyteros, could be an honorific, an office, or simply a term for an aged teacher, not a strict non-apostolic label. Partisan agendas. Irenaeus' interest, the neat chain of apostolic succession to bolster orthodoxy. Okay, that might be the reason he wants this clear lineage. Eusebius' interest, downplaying a millenarianism and moving revelation away from the Apostle John, hence emphasizing the 2 Johns, right? So he has his own reason to do this as well. The historical pinch point, if Polycarp's John was the elder presbyter, the apostolic link is one step more distant. Okay, so from Jesus, okay, the apostles, John the elder, Polycarp, and then Irenaeus, instead of a clean orthodox line. This clearer line would be Jesus, John the Apostle, Polycarp, and then Irenaeus. And if Papias' testimony is taken at face value, the elder presbyter was still alive in Papias' day, making it chronologically more likely Polycarp met him, right, rather than a centenarian apostle. Right? If you look, so we have some difficulty here. This is it though. This is the only thing connecting the church here and the fourfold edition here of the Gospels, and the establishment of the true church, if you like, that Irenaeus is pushing now, specifically Irenaeus, really, because once you get Origen and people like Clement of Alexandria, they're often talking in fairly Gnostic kind of terms and dithering from this church line in their own way. Origen got into trouble in his lifetime for some of the things that he was saying. So it's on the shakiest ground that we have any clear lineage of this apostolic line, and there is mud here. There are spanners in the works when we're trying to find this history. And of course, there's so much that might have been clouded over, that may well have been pushed to the side and not commented upon by these early fathers. One of them, very obviously, would be that Valentinus and Marcion are right there in Rome, talking before Irenaeus is. And how they have very established churches, and they are both. It looks as though Valentinus prized A. John and the Johannine Gospel. Now, who knows who wrote the Johannine, John's Gospel? It most likely was not John the Apostle. It just doesn't seem to have been written by someone who was otherwise completely illiterate. And it doesn't really tally with the synoptics. It often says it even states in John's Gospel that it was not written by John. That this is the thing that John was saying. I'll find that quote for you. And of course, we have about 3 different redactions of John's Gospel. So who knows what, if you look at my previous video, only released a few days ago, on the Dionysian aspects there of John, we can see that. I think it's quite interesting. It could be me reading into things and other scholars reading into things. I'm not a scholar, by the way, but yes, this is all rather interesting and strange. And just remember, the Holy Family was just lost to time after Jesus. The 12 disciples are just lost to time. No one really talks about them apart from the Gospel accounts, and they are pretty dodgy, really. They don't seem to be relaying history. They seem to be talking in a mythic, grand Prosian sense. Relaying stories rather than history. So we have to be very careful about treating them as history, especially when they're full of magical things. Anyway, I hope that was interesting for you all, and I'll be back in England soon so we can pick up things where we left off. I just wanted to put out a video every day while I was here, just to prove to myself that I could do that. So yeah, anyway, bye.